I have a list of 10 books that I want to talk about that are my honorable mentions for 2024. They're the books I read that were very close to being favorites. I do plan on making an actual favorites video. I just have to gear myself up for it and get the energy to film that one. Let's go ahead and get right into my honorable mentions of 2024. The first book is The House That Horror Built by Christina Henry. Oh, this book actually has pretty poor ratings on Goodreads. I'm looking at it on Goodreads and it only has a 3.21. That's really low. I rated this book 4 stars. I really liked it. And as I was going through and picking out my favorites of 2024, I was picking out all the books that was standing out to me. Like, oh, I have such fond memories of that one. I remember that one really clearly. And this was one of those that I picked out and I was like, okay, it's not quite like #1 favorite. It wasn't a 5-star, but I still really liked it. I have fond memories of it. So I read this book in a single sitting. I remember sitting on the couch and listening to this book, the audiobook, and playing this phone game app that I have, and I did it for 4 hours straight. This book follows the main character named Harry, who is a single mother, and she's living in an expensive city, struggling to make a living and provide for her teenage son. So she actually gets a new job working for a famous reclusive horror director as his house cleaner. Soon after getting hired, though, she starts noticing very weird occurrences in the home. Despite getting increasingly freaked out, she gets more and more entrenched in this director's life and home and more unable to withdraw from it. Here's the thing that really connected me to this book was the characters, particularly the main character, Harry. I really liked her. I felt like her motivations were interesting. Well, not interesting. I mean, she's trying to take care of her son. It was compelling. Her motivations were compelling to me, and I wanted to see her succeed, and I wanted to see what was going to happen to her. I feel like I could empathize with her. I liked her plight as a character, her struggle. So the characters were interesting and endearing, despite the plot itself being rather slow. So that's one thing. It is a slow plot. For the majority of the story, it's Harry cleaning this man's house and weird things starting to happen, but not a lot of other stuff happens. It's mostly character driven, which I really liked because I found the characters so interesting. The ending was shocking to me, and if it can shock me, then it gets points for that, because I've read so many books that it's hard for me to be genuinely shocked, and this ending was surprising to me. Yes, it may have been a little bit rushed, it may have wrapped up a little bit conveniently, but for me, it was very entertaining and unpredictable. I value that in a book, if it can be unpredictable, because like I said, with the amount of books I've read, especially within the genres of horror, thriller, or mystery, I feel like I've seen it all. So if you can shock me, be unpredictable, that stands out to me. And like I said, the #1 thing why I pulled this book out, I really, really liked the characters. So the next book on my list is called Ghost Mother by Kelly Dwyer. Don't click out of this video yet if you read this book and you just hated it, because I can empathize with you and understand why you did not like this book. I'm trying to learn more about myself as a reader and learn when is it time for me to DNF. So I pushed myself through this one. I pushed myself to finish it, and I was really genuinely glad I did. After paying more than they can afford to move into a stately, historic fixer-upper mansion, main character Lily Bly finds out too late that her new home is coined by the town the Murder House. She then feverishly begins investigating what occurred in her new home while she becomes convinced that the previous homeowners are haunting her. What drew me into this one is I love haunted house books. I love anything paranormal, anything to do with ghosts. There were times reading this that I wanted to DNF it. Really wanted to DNF it. The biggest thing that ends up coming in later on why I was struggling with this one was the main characters. The main character comes off as very privileged. She is a bit has this self-sabotaging nature to her. I'll get into that a little bit more. Something I hate reading about is infertility. So this book does have a lot to do with infertility issues because the main character desperately wants to have a baby. And that is like her main focus. The whole book is trying to get pregnant. So they bought this mansion because she really loved it. She wanted to move into it. It's this historic house, but it's a fixer-upper. It needs a lot of work. And her husband has a good job, so he's providing for them. She basically wants to get pregnant, so she doesn't have a job, but she needs to get a job because they can't afford this house on just his income. Like, she wanted to move there, okay, then she needs to get a job and help pay for it because it's too expensive for them. So she starts spending so much on the credit cards. Like, she maxes out all their credit cards, and then she gets a job at the local library. She's not making a lot of money, but hey, she got a job. And then the way that she is performing at this job, she's performing terribly at work. Like, she's being irresponsible. Like, she's trying to investigate, is her house haunted? What were these old homeowners? So she's like taking really long lunch breaks. She's getting called out at work for her poor performance. She's frustrating to read about. She really is, because she's so like single-minded. She just wants to get pregnant. She just wants to be a mom. That's all she wants. She wants to figure out what's going on with this house. She loves this house. She feels very attached to this house, and she starts to become estranged from her husband because she's acting increasingly erratic and he doesn't understand it, and he's getting frustrated because he's having to work so much to like pay for it, you know? And I started to become hooked at that point when she's having all these struggles with her job and with her husband, and she's starting to go off the rails. And that's something that I really love reading about, is characters who slowly over the course of the book start losing touch with reality and start losing their mind. And by the end of it, it's like, they're gone. Like, they're gone. So I love reading about that. That is a big thing that connected me to Ghost Mother, was that theme of like this character slowly losing touch with reality. Especially I love reading about that with women characters, probably because I feel like I can connect to it. I have one book in particular that I will say is my #1 favorite book I read in 2024, and it centers around this theme of women slowly losing touch with reality and ending up in this like dream state. It's very fascinating to me. It's very interesting to me. I feel like I can connect and relate to it. So that is something that is happening to this main character. Now, by 61% in, that is when I really was getting into this book. The classic haunted house plot where like the wife, it's usually the wife, is seeing something in the house, experiencing up the paranormal, and like the husband does not believe her. That's what starts happening, and I was hooked. I really like that sort of plot line. I love haunted house stories, so that is very classic. The only downside I wrote is that it takes about 60% of the book to get there. It definitely had me hooked by that point, but it took a long time. By 80% of the book, that is where it really gets into the meat of the story, and I really fell in love with it. By 80% to the end, I think about this book a lot, okay? I think about the characters. Nobody in this book is redeemable. Like, none of them. Like, none of the characters. But the book somehow works out, and it's also heartbreaking. The writing towards the end was so potent and poignant. It's very sad. It makes you think a lot. Somebody like me who's fascinated by ghosts and the paranormal and like the afterlife, I can really see this like being real almost. Like, I can see this kind of thing having happened before, and nobody's good. Everybody had their own things that was bad that they did, but it still kind of works out in a way. I really like this one. I rated it 4 stars. I think about it a lot. It sticks with me. So that book, Ghost Mother, made my list of my honorable mentions of 2024. The next one, I have quite a few nonfiction books on this list. So the next one is Sensitive: The Hidden Power of the Highly Sensitive Person in a Loud, Fast, Too Much World. This book made so much sense to me. I related to it, I connected to it. I still really want to reread it and annotate it because there's so many quotes in here that like punch me in the gut. If you too are somebody who has always been very sensitive, like me, like maybe emotional and thin-skinned, sometimes the world is overwhelming to me, I'm realizing being sensitive is a gift and something that makes me an empathetic friend and listener, and is extremely attuned to the feelings of others. I truly feel like this book is finding me at a pivotal moment in my life and consciously helping me get to know myself better and realize that who I am is not something to apologize for. So this is one of those books that I would like recommend widely. Like, I feel like a lot of people out there could relate to this. This is one that I would really recommend. I rated this book a full 5 stars. So the next book in my honorable mentions is Rouge by Mona Awad. I rated this book 4 stars. It took me a really long time to finish it. So I put it down for a real long time. And then even when I picked it back up again, I had a hard time finishing it. All of that being said, I still consider it an honorable mention because it was special, because it stood out, because it was different than anything else I read, and because of the emotions and like feelings that I had when I read it. Her writing style is so surreal. That's what I love, is a surreal fever dream type of book. And Rouge is like that. It's not as fever dreamy as Bunny is, but it is still very surreal and like dreamlike and strange. My criteria of rating, something that I really prioritize or value, is originality. And how much does this book stand out in my memory? How long will I remember it? By 46% in, I said really good, atmospheric, trippy vibes. I love that. 60%, I said a little too much time gone by with too few details. Too much time not knowing what's going on. While I'm starting to get bored with the same elusive scene playing out and the main character being confused. Like, why does every chapter seem to be the main character waking up feeling lost? So yeah, that's fair. It takes longer to get to the point than I would like, but I also get what she's doing. Like, she's creating atmosphere, you know, and that takes time. Disorienting. I wrote 67% disorienting. I love the feeling of disorientation. Well, maybe not in my waking reality, I don't, but in books or like in movies. Okay, so here, by the end, I think that is why I've really considered rating this to a 5 star, because the ending really got my brain turning, thinking, guessing, wondering. I was looking up Reddit threads, and that is how I know I am hooked. Is if I am going down Reddit thread wormholes trying to figure out what was that thing about. I felt like when I got to the end, like I needed to know more. I need to see, what did other people think? And what even do I think? I love anything that is gonna make me wanna like analyze it and reread it, because I have a very like analyzing type of brain. I want to really deep dive into it and like analyze it so deeply and rewatch it a million times. Or like, I'm the type of person that can listen to the same song on loop for hours and still get something new out of it. And that's something I felt like with this book, was that this is a book to be analyzed and reread. Surrealism and metaphors and buried meanings. That is so true. That is on point. That is Mona Awad, is surrealism, metaphors, and buried meanings. So it's still an honorable mention. It's still a special book. It's one I would like to reread. A lot of these are ones I would like to reread. The next book to talk about is one that I finally jumped on the train and read it myself. I had been wanting to, finally did. So that book is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. I really do not read very many memoirs, but I feel like I should. I really want to read Britney Spears' book, because I feel like she has been through so much. I feel like I could learn so much from her resilience, how much she's endured and overcome. And Jennette McCurdy's book was like everything I just said. The guttural honesty is incredible. Refreshing, powerful, moving, inspiring. This is how you tell your story. She was incredibly honest. So honest in a way that I desperately wish I could be and want to be. The things that she shared, that she was not afraid was going to be viewed by the public and that she was going to be perceived for, was truly amazing and inspiring to me. Like, she told her life story and all these things that could be embarrassing, like detrimental to her, like for people to know. And she wasn't afraid of it. Like, she's like, this is true. This is what happened to me. This is what I believe. And she let it all out. And I have so much respect for that. Jennette McCurdy, of course, is from iCarly and then went to play on Sam and Cat, and she worked very closely with Dan Schneider. He created both of those shows. So I was very, very, very interested at a point last year in all that drama that was going on with him and the whole Nickelodeon thing. And so I wanted to learn more, finally read her book, and I was so glad I did. When she was getting into acting, it was because her mom wanted that for her so much, and she wanted to please her mom. Mother-daughter relationships have always interested me and intrigued me, and so I felt like I got a lot from this. I really like this one. I can totally see why it blew up as much as it did. I really respect Jennette McCurdy, and I want to get into reading more memoirs, especially Britney Spears' memoir. I want to read her book some point in, hopefully in 2025. So the next book that made my honorable mentions list is a book called Mirrorland by Carole Johnstone. So I ended up getting this book at a library book sale, and surprisingly, it was one of those random books that I picked up from a library book sale that I ended up actually reading, one, because a lot of the books I pick up from library book sales, I never end up reading. And then two, I actually ended up loving it. I rated it 5 stars. Mirrorland reads like a dark, twisted fairy tale. I love a book that reads like a fairy tale. Oh, there's so many I could pick out. There's so many I could pick out. But this one right here, In the House in the Dark of the Woods, one of my all-time favorites. This is one of those books that reads like a dark fairy tale, like something from Grimm's fairy tales or something, but modern like this. So this reads like a modern, dark, twisted fairy tale. The writing is very surreal. If you are watching this video, you can tell what I like. I like surreal. I like books that are surreal. I like a fever dream book. I like a book that feels fuzzy. I like a book that feels fuzzy. Okay, the writing blew me away. I was fully immersed in the storytelling, and through the author's expert use of magical realism, love magical realism, like love it so much. I was lost in this world of make-believe pirate ships and little girls who brave the horrors of sea and home. Because the two main characters, it's about twins, and their home life is not good. Before you read this book, know that there are major trigger warnings for this one, okay? Of like child abuse, SA. Those are the two big ones. Child abuse, SA, like familial abuse, like it's heavy, it's dark. So please do not go into this one lightly. If those are triggers of mine. But I was able to read it. A lot of times, if books are about that sort of thing, I don't end up liking them, or it just really depends how they're done. And I felt like this book was done well. Okay, I found this story beautiful. I love how in fiction you can sometimes get to see the good people win and the bad people actually pay for their actions for once, because we know in real life that hardly ever happens. Like there's hardly ever actual justice. So for that reason, this book reads like the best kind of fairy tale, the kind with a happy ending, even though so much of it devastated me to the core. This book was devastating. It made me feel a lot, and because of those trigger warnings, but it's so pretty, it's beautiful, it's lovely. Oh, I also, like how I said about the Jennette McCurdy book with mother-daughter relationships, I also love books about sisterhood. And this book focuses so much on sisterhood, the unbreakable bond between sisters, and I loved it. So if you were into magical realism, you might really like this one too. It's kind of an underrated book. It was a random pick for me, and I ended up loving it. I rated this book 5 stars. The next book that I have to talk about is another one I have. That book is called Wintering: The Power of Rest and Retreat in Difficult Times. It's so funny. I actually just made my husband read this book because, so I read this 2024, obviously, that's what this video is about. I read it towards the beginning of the year. And then lately, so we're back in winter time again, and my husband has been talking about like really feeling sad and depressed that it's winter, and that you know, we can't go outside and be warm and do the outdoor activities that we like to do. And I was like, I have the perfect book for you to read. Read Wintering, because it will make you appreciate winter so much and not dread it, and realize like why winter is important and good, and it's not a time to just like hate, you know? So this book is not just about this season of winter. It's also about the seasons in our life that are like winters. Like we all could go through seasons in our lives that are like winters, where we are depressed or there's things going on, we have to slow down, we have to take steps backwards. That's what this book is about, and it's really inspiring. This book gave me a new perspective on the difficult times I faced in my life. Instead of always enduring with resistance and obstinance, this book was like a drop of water that created a ripple effect within me to start re-examining what I have always considered as a burden or a nuisance, something to avoid at all costs and burrow and hibernate away from. My favorite thing this book did for me was ease me into a deep state of introspection. I really love that. I love books that will make me self-reflect, like what I've gone through, what I'm going through, how I reacted, how I could have done better. I like this. I think a lot of people could get a lot from this one, similar to the one I talked about earlier, Sensitive, that I would like to see a lot of people read. Wintering is the same thing. If you guys could read like some nonfiction books in 2025, put these two on your TBR because they will really do a lot for you. These two help me. So yeah, I really loved Wintering. I rated Wintering 5 full stars. The next book on my honorable mentions is Nestlings by Nat Cassidy. I love Nat Cassidy so much. Mary is one of those books that I will forever love. I still have a gazillion annotations in here from 2023 that I need to go in and like fix. I love Mary so much. Nat Cassidy, you are an amazing author. I don't think you can ever write a book that I won't like, because Nestlings was not as amazing as Mary was, but only because Mary was on such a high pedestal that like nothing he ever writes, like nothing anyone else ever writes could knock it off of its pedestal, except for The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. Like The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson is like my all-time favorite book, but Mary is probably number 2. It is number 2 right after that. So like nothing that he ever writes again, I think, could knock that one out. It was so powerful. Like I love how we're supposed to be talking about Nestlings and we're talking about Mary. Nestlings. I really enjoyed this book. It's like a vampire / haunted house story, like haunted apartment story. Very well written. Nat Cassidy is such a good author. He knows how to write a story. He knows how to write something that is going to be engaging, engrossing, make you connect to the characters, scare you. I could not have predicted how the story ended. Not a happy ending, yet one of the most satisfying conclusions I have ever read. Okay, so I'm not going to spoil anything, but I said the main character choosing what was best for her daughter, no matter how forced her hand was or how unconventional the situation, but putting all of that aside to do what was best for her daughter. Like that was so, I loved that. Loved. Nestlings. Will continue reading anything from this author ever. I don't think he'll ever disappoint me. I would be shocked if he did. Okay, we're almost done. The next one to talk about is Carmilla, a classic. And we do have some classics on my actual favorites of the year. All of these books that are honorable mentions are because they're books that I considered being actual like #1 favorites. But I didn't want my list of #1 favorites to be 30 books long. So I culled it. I really tried to narrow it down. I think I have 11 books that ended up making my top list. I loved all of these, of course, but I really loved Carmilla. I rated it 5 stars. The thing that separated a lot of these books from the actual like favorites list was the fact that I felt like for a lot of these, I needed to reread them before I could call them favorites of the year. Because a lot of times you read a book in January and you love it, but how can you really tell if when you get to December that book really deserves to be like the favorite of the year? So Carmilla is one of those where I feel like I need to reread it. I really liked it. I rated it 5 stars. I thought it was an excellent read. Okay, what I loved the most about this one was the gothic vibes, the descriptions of the scenery, like the forest and the nature and like the home and the decorations of the home. Lovely gothic imagery. Beautiful. I love that Carmilla is like one of the first like female, like it's not a love story. It's like it's a toxic love story, right? But it is still like a female story, and it's one of the first ones. This book was published in 1872. That is absolutely incredible to me that we were telling female stories in 1872 and this author was not burned at the stake for it. Like, that's amazing to me. I don't have a page number because I read this via audio, but it was something I wrote down, but to die as lovers may. I think Carmilla says that. But to die as lovers may, ... unless it should be with you. I don't know. I don't have like the full quote. But I said she did not just say that. Definitely a toxic relationship and by no means something to be romanticized in real life, but let me have my fiction. I realized that in real life, we would not be rooting for this couple and we would be like wanting them to go to therapy. But this is fiction and let me just enjoy my fiction. And that is how I felt like with these two main female characters. Like, let me romanticize them. I just love it. I love female relationships. I love this is from 1872. I loved Carmilla. I really did. I want to reread it. The gothic vibes, totally for me. The last book to talk about for my honorable mentions of 2023 is Disappearance at Devil's Rock by Tremblay. This book really stuck out to me. I still remember it so much. It made me really think. It made me really feel. By far, Tremblay's best work yet. I've read quite a few books from this author, and this is the only one that I really enjoyed. The others were like middling experiences or I really didn't like them. Parts of this book ran too long for me, but the mystery itself was incredibly engrossing. And the villain of this book, I said villain if you can call him that, was a truly fascinating and developed character. I wanted to get inside his mind and understand his motives. I think the author did a great job writing about a family being torn apart and having to pull themselves back together after the disappearance. This was a fantastic piece of speculative fiction. So this is another one that is kind of like on the paranormal side. It's like a bit of a ghost story. It's following a family. The son ends up going missing. And we're following mostly his mom, but also his sister as they're processing his disappearance and trying to figure out what happened to him. It gets longer and longer that he's been missing, more likely that he's not going to be found or at least found alive. Speculative fiction. It was speculative because what happened to them? We find out what happened to them, but it's still speculative. It's like what happened to them was not really exactly based in reality. Like what we're told. It's weird, you know? A genre of fiction that encompasses works in which the setting is other than the real world, involving supernatural, futuristic, or other imagined elements. If you like that, you might very much like Disappearance at Devil's Rock. I recommend it. I rated it 4 stars because, like I said, parts of it ran too long for me, but it made me think a lot. The characters was very interesting to me. So those are my 10 honorable mentions of 2024. I had a real rocky 2024. I'm trying to have a better 2025. I will have a video coming out at some point in the future talking about my actual like favorites of the year of 2024. So stay tuned for that. Other than that, thank you so much for watching and I will see you in the next video.